Not as fancy, but no. Maybe another. We have a book or something. Something that we can keep it from flying. 1 second. Okay.
Very technical you are.
Good evening, everyone. In the description of the covenant that appears in this week's parsha, so Moshe says specifically that this is milvad habris. This is over and above the covenant that the Lord made with you at Sinai, but that this is a permanent covenant that will last for all of the generations of the Jewish people. Eternal covenant. And it's not dependent on anything. And then Moshe says a remarkable statement that this covenant applies Eis asher yesh no imonu po omeid hayom, to all of those who are here today, who stand at the covenant. Le'ovrecha b'vris Hashem Elokecha uve'olato, and also es asher einenu po imonu hayom, those that are not here. So all the Meforshim discuss, how can you bind people who are not there, who are not participants? Like, can I make a commitment that binds you? So what does Moshe mean when he says, even those who are not here today? So the Meforshim look at it in a few general views. One is the Jewish people are an entity. You know, in our time, for instance, we have economic entities that are not people, corporations, amutot, all sorts of things. They're not people, but they have standing. They're a legality. And they have the quality that somehow they are immortal, if you wish them to be so. So they are corporations that are hundreds of years old. So even though the original people who created it and founded it are no longer here, but the corporation is still here. And the corporation is bound to its original founding document, so to speak. And that therefore later generations that somehow attach themselves to the corporation, either you buy stock in it, or you become a director, or you become the head of the corporation, you may automatically assume what went on before you. The agreements, the debts, everything that was involved. So one view of the Meforshim, that I don't express it in quite these terms, but I'm only using it l'saber ha'ozen in order to make it more understandable to us, is that if you attach yourself to the corporation, if you buy stock in the corporation, if you're a director of the corporation, so you didn't have to be there when the corporation was founded in order for you to be bound by the founding doctrines and the founding documents of the corporation. So Moshe views Klal Yisrael, Kaviochel, as this type of corporation. The Novi says, V'chol ish asher b'shem Yisrael yechule. Anybody who calls himself a Jew. So even though he was not present when the corporation was founded, he's living 3,000 years after Maimon Har Sinai. Nevertheless, since he calls himself a Jew, so that's his stock in the corporation, so he's bound to what the corporation pledged themselves. And therefore, that's the idea. Moshe says there'll be generations later that didn't stand here at the end of the 40 years, that didn't pass through this renewal of the covenant, but they're going to be bound anyway, because they're going to call themselves Jews. They're going to attach themselves to Judaism. And therefore, they are willing participants in the covenant itself. Now, that's one approach. There's a Kabbalistic approach that I think is more popular. And that approach is that all of the Jewish souls, the neshamas from Klal Yisrael, over all of the generations, the millions and millions and millions of neshamos, were present at Har Sinai. And that therefore, when the Jewish people said, Naaseh v'nishma, all of these souls said it as well. So even though the soul would not appear in a body for thousands of years, nevertheless, because it was at Har Sinai, it accepted upon itself the covenant and everything that comes with it. So Moshe is just renewing that. So as Asher Einenu Imonu Omed Hayom, they haven't come yet, but their soul was here. They committed themselves. And in that commitment, they are partners in the covenant and everything that it entails. There are Kabbalists that even take it further. That there were 600,000 between the age of 20 and 60. So let's say there were 3 million altogether. So there is an idea that these are the core of the Jewish people. Somehow these 3 million, all the other millions that we have attach themselves to them. But by attaching themselves to them, they somehow accept upon themselves the covenant as well. There's a third idea that I think all of us can identify with. Every child, for instance, that's born in the United States today is already $65,000 in debt. This infant didn't do anything. Nevertheless, being born in the United States and being a United States citizen automatically creates this situation. And as long as one remains that way, then one is bound to, even though the child didn't accumulate the debt, the child didn't do anything. His parents did, his grandparents, his great-grandparents, somebody else did it, the government did it. And nevertheless, we all recognize that that's part of the national burden. You're born, you're a citizen, so you take the whole package. Even though in technical terms, you never did anything to assume that debt or to assume that burden. And therefore, the same idea applies here. Moshe said, everybody that will be born Jewish, so they stuck with the national debt. Even if he's not standing here today, because that's the derech olam, that's the way society operates. And therefore, Moshe is justified in saying that this covenant applies even to those who are not present today and do not say that they willingly accept it, but they have no choice because that's where they're born. This is the society that they live in. That's where they remain. So that's what happens almost automatically. So that is an idea that perhaps is difficult to bear because it seems to be unfair. But nevertheless, it's a reality, certainly a reality in the world in terms of many, many things. And therefore, you hear it today regarding reparations, for instance, that the grandchildren say, we weren't alive then, we didn't do anything, why should we have to pay? The answer is because this is the country you're born in. And you have the responsibility for what the country did. And therefore, you're also obligated. So in the spiritual realm, Moshe includes all of the Jewish people in the covenant. Even those that are not here. It's a cumulative effect. It's the society as a whole. And therefore, that's the effect of the covenant that binds the Jewish people. And Kaviyachal, the Rabboni Shalom, on the other side, throughout all of the generations and throughout all of the events that have occurred to us. And Moshe wants to impress this upon the Jewish people. Lo itchem levadchem anochi koreis esabris vesola azos. You shouldn't think it's only with you, because you represent the past and the future. You represent everything that's going to happen to us. And that therefore gives greater weight and importance to what we do and how we think of ourselves. But it also is the link that allows us to be bound to the covenant. And the covenant eventually is the eternal bond between God and the Jewish people. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Yomer Rotza Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakas Yisrael V'chachir B'lahem Torah Mitzvot Shenemar Adonai Chafetz Aman Tzidko Yagdil Torah V'Yadiyah.
Thank